The rain was coming down so hard it felt like the sky wanted to bury me. I sat in my car, engine off, windshield wipers struggling, staring at the house I'd just bought. If you could even call it that. It was more like a forgotten shell, $1, 200 of rot, rust, and regret. Shingles missing. Porch steps collapsed. Windows fogged with mildew and decades of dirt. A place that looked like it had been trying to die quietly for years. And now it was mine. All mine. My fingers trembled around the steering wheel, not from cold, but from what I'd just done. I'd taken everything I had, my life savings, my last sliver of hope, and bought a house that no sane person would touch. Because I had no one left. No couch to crash on. No, come home, we'll figure it out. Just silence. And that one message. The one that broke me. It was a screenshot. From my cousin Dan. It showed the family group chat. Except I wasn't in it anymore. The message was simple. He made his choice. We have to protect our energy. Consider this a closed chapter. Then a string of heart emojis, yoga gifs, and Kyle, my brother, thanking everyone for honoring his journey. Kyle, the golden son, the walking hashtag, the one whose latest wellness retreat cost $15,000. And they expected me, Marcus, the broke IT guy living paycheck to paycheck, to foot the bill because you don't have kids, so what else are you spending money on? When I said no, they acted like I'd slapped a newborn. No one else is in a position to help, Mom had said, her voice dripping with that calm, guilt-laced tone I'd grown up fearing. You owe him, Dad muttered. He's your brother. I owe myself, I'd said. It was the first time I'd ever said something like that out loud. They didn't like it. 2 days later, I was erased. Blocked. Uninvited from family events. My birthday passed without a single text. Even Grandma, who once snuck me cookies behind Mom's back, sent me a message that just said, Marcus, I'm disappointed. So I did what any unwanted son would do. I cashed out everything. 401k, savings, the tiny inheritance from a great uncle I never met, and bought the only thing I could afford. This house. This wreck. This graveyard of someone else's memories, now becoming the reluctant birthplace of mine. The rain had slowed, just barely. I opened the car door and stepped out, my shoes immediately soaking in the mud. The house loomed ahead, not inviting, but at least honest. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. Unlike my family, I reached the porch and ducked under the sagging awning. The key I held was cold, rough, too big for my hand. I slid it into the rusted lock. It stuck for a moment, then turned with a dry click. The door creaked open. It smelled like time and dust, like forgotten things, like the end of something and maybe, just maybe, the start of something else. I stepped inside. I was alone. Truly, finally, undeniably alone. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like running from it. I'd begged for scraps of love for 32 years. Now, I had silence, and a house no one else wanted. Both were mine. That night, I lay on the dusty floor with an old sleeping bag and a bottle of gas station whiskey, staring up at the cracked ceiling. Every creak of the house sounded like a voice I hadn't heard in years. But it wasn't ghosts haunting me, it was memories. I couldn't stop thinking about the cake. It was my 9th birthday. I'd been begging for a space-themed party for months. I didn't care about gifts. I just wanted that cake, black with stars, a little fondant rocket ship on top. When Mom brought it out, it said, "Happy birthday, Mark," in smeared red icing. Mark. My name was Marcus. They all laughed like it was nothing. Kyle leaned over and said, "Guess you're just not that memorable." That line carved itself into my brain like graffiti on a bathroom stall. That's how my family treated me. Like an afterthought. Like an error they never corrected. I remember when I got that full ride to state college. My acceptance letter came with a scholarship offer, tuition, books, everything. I was the first in the family to get anything like it. I ran into the kitchen, waving the letter like it was on fire. Dad didn't look up from the TV. "That's nice. You talked to your brother? He's thinking about starting a podcast." A podcast? Kyle's latest phase. Before that, he tried to be a DJ, then a crystal healer, then a real estate TikToker. Every time he reinvented himself, the whole family rallied like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. But when I landed my first tech job after college, they said, "So, you fix printers?" I spent so much of my life convincing myself it didn't matter. That being the responsible one meant something. That getting good grades, never getting arrested, never borrowing money, showing up to every holiday with gifts and casseroles, that eventually they'd see me. But they never did. Kyle once got a tattoo on his forearm that said, "I am the storm." He posted a shirtless photo of it on Instagram and got 11,000 likes. When I quietly paid off Grandma's medical bills last year, no one even noticed. I wasn't even in the family slideshow at Mom's 60th. "You must have just missed it," she said, flipping through the PowerPoint like I was delusional. I thought of that stupid phrase Kyle used to chant during his manifestation meditations, "What you water will grow." Well, I was a cactus. I grew without water. I survived on dust and grit and whatever sunlight I could find. But now I had nothing to prove. There were no more auditions. No more report cards. No more hoping they'd finally say, "We're proud of you, Marcus." They weren't coming. And somewhere deep down, I was starting to realize that might be the best thing that ever happened to me. I stood up, flashlight in hand, and began walking through the house. The floors groaned under me. Cobwebs brushed my face. But as I looked around, I saw more than decay. I saw potential. In the mess. In the silence. In myself. This place didn't care if I was Marcus or Mark or nobody. It just needed someone willing to fix it. I could do that. I had been fixing broken things my whole life. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of someone pounding on the front door. My heart jumped. I grabbed a wrench, the closest thing to a weapon I had, and crept toward the noise. "Dude, are you squatting? Or is this officially your apocalypse hideout?" I peeked through a shattered window pane and saw a familiar smirk. Trevor. I hadn't seen him in nearly 3 years. We met back in college. He was my roommate during freshman year. He once saved me from failing calculus and taught me how to cook pasta that didn't come from a box. Life had scattered us in different directions, but every so often, he'd send a meme or a "still alive" text. I didn't realize how much I missed that voice until I heard it again. I opened the door, still in my pajamas and wrapped in a thrift store blanket. Trevor held up a pizza box in one hand and a six-pack in the other. "I heard you bought a haunted shack. Thought I'd come bless it with carbs and alcohol." I wanted to laugh, but I just stood there, stunned. I don't know what got to me more, his timing, or the fact that someone still wanted to show up for me. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "But sit at your own risk. Most of the chairs are probably cursed." He stepped over a pile of splintered wood and looked around with wide eyes. "Wow, this place smells like broken dreams and mouse pee." "I prefer to call it vintage decay," I said. We sat on overturned crates, eating cold pizza in the middle of a torn-up living room. I told him everything. The retreat, the family betrayal, the screenshot from Dan, even the cake with my name spelled wrong. He listened without interrupting, except to toss me another beer. "Man," he finally said, shaking his head, "your family sucks harder than a black hole." I cracked a smile. "Thanks. That means a lot." He looked around. "You gonna do this alone?" "I was planning on it," I said. "Until now, I didn't know I had any other option." Trevor stood, stretched, and grabbed a loose floorboard like he was evaluating it for a home reno show. "Well, lucky for you. I just got laid off and have zero ambition. Let's build you a fortress." I didn't say anything at first. The idea of someone helping me, not because they had to, not out of guilt or image management, but just because they cared, was foreign, unsettling, and yet comforting. Later that evening, my phone rang. I nearly ignored it. But the name on the screen stopped me, Aunt Karen. We hadn't spoken in years. She'd been exiled from the family after divorcing my uncle and publicly calling out my grandmother's casual racism at Thanksgiving. From that moment on, she was labeled toxic and erased. I answered. Her voice was warm, familiar. "I heard what happened, kid." Dan told me. "Welcome to the club." "Which club is that?" I asked. "The one where you find out your family only loves you as long as you behave." She told me her story. The loneliness, the shame, the relief, and then the healing. She'd built a new life in Oregon, far from the group chat and its fake apologies. "They'll come back, Marcus," she said. "They always do. But only when they need something. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Between Trevor and Aunt Karen, I realized I wasn't starting from nothing. I had allies. I had people who'd seen through the family fog and still chose to stand by me. That night, we lit a fire in the old fireplace and mapped out our first big project, gutting the kitchen. It was time to rebuild. Not just the house, but myself. The kitchen demolition took the better part of 2 days. Underneath the peeling linoleum and grease-stained cabinets, Trevor and I found remnants of someone else's past, old coupons from the 80s, a yellowed Polaroid of a dog named Buck, and a stash of expired soup cans in a hidden panel beneath the sink. Every layer we peeled away felt like a small exorcism. The house was slowly shedding its ghosts. So was I. By the end of the week, the place was still a wreck, but it was our wreck. Trevor stayed on the ratty couch we salvaged from the curb, and every night we made pasta, drank cheap beer, and argued about music like we were back in college again. There was laughter now. Real, unsupervised joy. And in the quiet moments between, I felt something unfamiliar blooming. Pride. That's when Kyle showed up. It was a Thursday. Gray and wet. The kind of day where everything smells like wetwood and regret. I was in the front yard with Trevor, trying to remove a half-buried birdbath when a Tesla pulled up to the curb. At first, I thought it was a neighbor. Then I saw the tinted window roll down. Wow, Kyle said, poking his head out, designer hoodie pulled tight around his bleach-tipped curls. This place is industrial. Trevor raised an eyebrow. Friend of yours? Unfortunately, I muttered. Kyle stepped out, white sneakers somehow avoiding every mud puddle. He walked up like he owned the sidewalk. Bro, I had no idea things were this bad. Why didn't you say something sooner? I didn't know what to say. The last time we'd spoken, he'd accused me of being selfish for not paying for his retreat. Now he was acting like he'd just discovered I was living under a bridge. Trevor crossed his arms. What do you want, Kyle? Kyle turned to me, flashing that smile, the same one he used in every social media post, carefully curated to look effortless. Look, I came to check on you. I know things got messy. Family drama, you know how it is. But I wanted to make sure you're okay. He hesitated, then added, also, my place is getting fumigated. Just for a night or two. Thought maybe I could crash here. There it was. The real reason. Kyle didn't do anything without a motive. He wasn't here for healing, he was here for shelter. Probably couldn't bear the idea of a hotel with less than 4 stars. I looked at Trevor, who shook his head ever so slightly. I could see it in his eyes. Don't do it. But something in me cracked. Maybe it was the training years of being the good son, the quiet one, the fixer. Maybe it was just the pathetic hope that, after everything, he was reaching out. Maybe it was the lie I'd always told myself, that if I just gave a little more, they'd finally see me. Fine, I said. One night. Couch only. Kyle grinned. Legend. That evening, Kyle moved in like he was starring in a reality show. He filmed Instagram stories from the backyard, commenting on the rustic charm and calling it a vibe. He snapped photos of his oat milk latte on the cracked windowsill. He even filmed himself hammering a loose nail for a DIY healing journey post. Trevor watched in silence, then turned to me. You sure about this? I gave him one night, I said. What's the worst that could happen? But I already knew the answer. I'd let the fox into the henhouse. And the moment I turned my back, he'd start setting fire to the place. I woke up to the sound of laughter. Not the good kind, the kind that vibrates with mockery. I was still half asleep, but something about it put me instantly on edge. The laugh wasn't coming from a person. It was coming from my phone. I reached for it and saw the notification at Kyle Unfiltered is live, 2.4K watching. My chest tightened. I bolted out of the bedroom and into the kitchen, barefoot, heart pounding. Kyle stood at the counter, ring light glowing, phone mounted to a tripod like it was hosting a cooking show. The caption under the live stream read, helping my broken brother rebuild his life, broken heart, derelict house, #healing journey, #blessed. Dude, what the hell? I said. He didn't flinch. Just turned slightly, gave me a grin, and whispered into the camera, there he is. The man himself. Real brave, y'all. Let's send him some love in the comments. I glanced at the screen. Comments were pouring in. This is so sad. OMG. He's living in that? Kyle, you're such a good person for helping. Link to donate? And there it was, pinned to the top of the chat, a GoFundMe link. Help Kyle support his brother's journey back to wholeness. The description underneath was pure fiction. Kyle painted himself as the heroic sibling who stepped away from his high-powered social media career to help me, his mentally struggling, emotionally isolated brother rebuilding from nothing. He didn't even ask me. He didn't warn me. He just monetized my pain in real time. I lunged for the phone, but Kyle stepped back. Whoa. Chill, man. I'm doing this for you. For me. My voice cracked. You're exploiting me for likes and donations. Kyle glanced at the comments. They love it. People want to help. Then let them help me, not your brand. Trevor walked in, took one look at the scene, and said, He's still here. Kyle turned the camera toward him. And here's Marcus's loyal friend, Trevor. Dude's been holding it down like a champ. Trevor snatched the phone and ended the live stream. Kyle lost it. Bro, you just cost us. Cost you, I said, stepping in. Get out. Kyle scoffed. You're seriously kicking me out over this? I'm bringing awareness to your situation. It's not a situation, it's my life. You don't get to spin it for likes. Fine, he muttered, grabbing his backpack. But just so you know, you're turning down a platform that could have helped you raise real money. I was trying to elevate your story. No, I said, opening the front door. You were hijacking it. Kyle stood in the doorway for a moment, searching my face for weakness. You'll regret this. I said nothing. He walked out. An hour later, the GoFundMe hit $8,000. My face, my broken-down house, my real name, was still plastered across the campaign. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to burn everything down. Instead, I picked up the phone. Aunt Karen answered on the first ring. What did he do? By the time I finished explaining, she was already formulating a plan. We go scorched earth, she said. I've been waiting for this. We looped in Trevor, who had screenshots of the live chat. Karen pulled old emails from Kyle's other scams. And I called someone I never thought I'd speak to again, a college buddy turned attorney. That night, we sat around the kitchen, drafting a strategy like it was a war room. Kyle thought he could broadcast my life like a charity case. He forgot I wasn't the quiet brother anymore. The thing about going to war with your family is this. No matter how justified you are, there's always collateral damage. Always fallout. And sometimes, the first bomb doesn't come from the person you're fighting. It comes from the ones you thought might stay out of it. 2 days after we shut down Kyle's livestream circus, my phone rang again. MOM lit up on the screen like a flare. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, it wasn't hope, just unfinished business, made me swipe. She didn't even say hello. I can't believe what you're doing to your brother. I sat down hard on the back steps of the house. The wood creaked under my weight. Come again. Kyle is hurting, she said. He was just trying to help. He told us how you screamed at him. You kicked him out onto the street. The street. I scoffed. He drove off in a Tesla. You're twisting things, Marcus. And now Aunt Karen is involved? You know she's always had it out for this family. There it was. The defense mechanism I knew too well. Minimize, deflect, protect the favorite at all costs. I didn't ask Kyle to come, I said, trying to stay calm. He showed up uninvited, filmed me without my consent, and raised money in my name. That's illegal. You don't see a problem with that. What I see is a family tearing itself apart. You're letting bitterness turn you into someone we barely recognize. No, I said. I'm finally becoming someone I recognize. She sighed like I was being unreasonable, like I was ruining Sunday dinner. He's your brother, Marcus. That used to mean something. Now it means don't rock the boat, even if it's on fire. I hung up before she could reply. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. From rage. From years of being gaslit into silence. Later that night, Trevor and I were cataloging screenshots, timestamps, donation records, Instagram reels, when Aunt Karen called. You got a minute? She asked. I stepped outside. The air smelled like cut grass and smoke from a neighbor's grill. For a second, it felt like a normal life. Like I was just a guy on his porch, chatting with his favorite aunt. Not a man preparing to blow up his family's golden boy. I did some digging, she said. Kyle's GoFundMe is just the start. He's been using the same fake nonprofit name across 3 different fundraising platforms. The gala he's planning? It's a front. I found inconsistencies in the grant applications. He's laundering donations through a shell LLC registered to some wellness collective in Sedona. You're kidding. I wish I was. I also talked to one of his exes. She said he used her mental health story in a campaign without permission. Exact same playbook. Every word Karen said was fuel to the fire. But under the heat was something else, grief. Not for Kyle, or the money, or the name my family had dragged through the dirt. It was grief for what I used to believe. That family protected you. That blood meant something. That being the good son would pay off in the end. It didn't. All I ever got was a front row seat to my own erasure. But now I was holding the receipts. Trevor came outside and handed me a printout. It was Kyle's charity mission statement, complete with motivational quotes and manipulated photos. We pinned it to the wall like evidence in a crime show. He wants to go public? I said, my voice steady now. Fine. We'll go public. I was done being the footnote in Kyle's story. It was time to make him a footnote in mine. It turns out, when you stop playing the quiet one, people don't know what to do with you. The day after Mom's call, I posted a single message to my old Facebook page, the one I hadn't touched in years. No longer staying silent. My brother used my face and story to raise money. Without consent. Receipts incoming. That was it. No hashtags. No angry rant. Just a warning shot. Within 10 minutes, my inbox filled up like a dam had cracked. Half were from extended family members telling me to take the post down. Don't drag the family name through the mud. Handle this privately. Think about your mother. The other half? Complete strangers. People who had donated. People who had stories just like mine. People who had followed Kyle's healing journey and were starting to realize it was a performance, not a process. I even got a message from a small-time journalist who'd been trying to investigate wellness scams and thought Kyle was worth looking into. That's when Trevor stepped in with his color-coded folders. We cleared out the living room, moved aside the salvage wood and broken tile, and set up a full-blown operation. Aunt Karen was patched in via Zoom. My lawyer friend, Malik, joined with a Dropbox folder so full of screenshots it looked like a digital crime scene. We gave the operation a name, Project Mirror. Because we weren't fabricating anything, we were just reflecting Kyle back at himself. First, we compiled every GoFundMe comment, every donor receipt, every Instagram story where Kyle name-dropped me as the wounded brother. Malik was already drafting a cease and desist. We were also prepping to report the campaign for fraud through every available platform. Then came the fun part. The gala. Kyle had announced it a week ago, set for the following Saturday in LA black tie, sponsored by some influencer wellness startup, supposedly to raise awareness for inner trauma through communal rebirth. Whatever that meant. Tickets were $250 each. And the main event? A 15-minute speech by Kyle himself, titled, From Pain to Power, My Journey Through My Brother's Struggle. I nearly broke a tooth grinding my jaw when I read that. He was going to stand on stage and turn me into a symbol, a wound he claimed to have healed, while pocketing donations that were supposed to rebuild my life. Not this time. Karen got us in through a friend 2 comp tickets, no questions asked. She booked a flight and promised to show up dressed to kill. We do this once, she said. And we do it loud. That week, Trevor and I rebuilt more than just our legal case. We put up drywall in the hallway, fixed the front steps, painted over the nicotine yellow walls with a soft gray I picked out on impulse. It felt symbolic, erasing decades of grime, not just on the walls, but on my life. We laughed during the work, cussed at the crooked beams, played music too loud, and ordered too much takeout. Trevor stayed past midnight most nights, drinking beer on the porch and asking what I'd do when this was all over. I didn't have an answer yet, but I was starting to think bigger than survival. I was starting to think about building something no one could take from me. On Friday night, we packed our bags. I looked at the house before we left, still unfinished, still a mess, but it didn't feel like a failure anymore. It felt like mine. Tomorrow, Kyle would face the mirror. And this time, I wouldn't be in the background. Walking into the gala felt like walking into an Instagram filter in real life. Everything was polished to the point of parody, glowing candlelight, massive orchid arrangements, gold accents, and a wall of influencers pretending to listen while secretly angling for better lighting. The venue was a downtown loft in LA, all exposed brick and white drapes, curated to feel both luxurious and raw. Trevor and I were dressed like we belonged, he in a navy suit with a barely tamed man bun, me in a borrowed tux from his cousin. But Aunt Karen was the star of our little rebellion. She wore fire engine red, floor-length satin with black gloves and a matching clutch. A storm in heels. The second she walked in, half the room looked over. The other half already knew to be afraid of her. You sure about this? Trevor whispered. No, I said. But I'm done waiting for justice to arrive by mail. We scoped out the layout. The center of the space was ringed with soft seating couches and half-empty champagne flutes. At the far end stood the stage, sleek, modern, and backlit with a glowing sign that read, The Kyle Initiative. Healing starts with one. Barf. Behind the stage, a projector flashed a slow slideshow. Kyle posing with rescued animals, Kyle meditating, Kyle standing in front of the house with his arms slung around me, captioned, Supporting my brother through transformation. He was everywhere. The MC, some tech wellness guru with bleached eyebrows and a nasal voice, welcomed everyone and kicked off the evening with buzzwords like vibrational synergy and spiritual alchemy. Then came a round of impact storytelling from other speakers. And then it was Kyle's turn. He took the stage like he was born on it. Black turtleneck, wireless mic, gentle piano music playing under his voice. "Thank you all for being here," he said, pausing with practiced humility. "I want to tell you a story. It's not about me. It's about my brother." I stared at him. So did Karen. So did Trevor. "My brother Marcus had a rough year," Kyle began. "Job loss. Isolation. Family breakdown. He bought a house that was, frankly, unlivable. And instead of turning away, I turned toward him. The screen behind him shifted to a still from his live stream, me, mid-yawn in the kitchen, looking dazed and disheveled. "I didn't go to help him," Kyle continued. "I want to heal with him." Trevor leaned over and whispered, "If he says wounded masculine energy, I'm walking out." But I stayed seated. We all did. Because this was the moment we'd prepared for. Kyle wrapped his speech with fake tears and a rousing quote. "One broken man can become the blueprint for collective restoration." The room applauded like he'd cured cancer. He stepped off stage and into the crowd. People hugged him, handed over checks, whispered affirmations into his perfect little ears. That's when Aunt Karen made her move. She stepped onto the stage with no introduction and took the mic from the MC. The room fell silent in that awful, electric way. People sensed a shift. The kind you can't unsee. "I'm Kyle's aunt," she began, voice firm. "And I'd like to correct the record." She gestured to the slideshow. What Kyle didn't mention is that Marcus never agreed to be part of this fundraiser. He never gave consent for his image or story. What Kyle also didn't say is that this entire nonprofit is a sham. Registered to a shell company. No financial transparency. No filed 990s. Just vibes. Murmurs spread through the crowd. She continued, reading directly from Kyle's emails, DM screenshots, even a draft message where he asked a friend to fake being a therapist for testimonials. Trevor started recording on his phone. I just stood still, watching. Kyle looked like someone had pulled the curtain back on The Wizard of Oz and found a very scared little man. When Karen finished, she handed the mic back and walked off stage to thunderous silence. No one clapped. Not yet. But the silence was louder than any applause. We didn't stick around for the fallout. As soon as Aunt Karen stepped off the stage, she walked straight past the sea of stunned faces and out into the cool Los Angeles night like she hadn't just napalmed an entire social ecosystem. Trevor and I followed her without a word, the sound of our shoes clicking against marble floors the only noise cutting through the silence behind us. We hit the parking lot, and for the first time all night, I exhaled. Karen let out a low chuckle as she reached her rental car. "Well, I haven't had that much fun since I poured boxed wine over your uncle's boat engine." Trevor clapped her on the back. "You were majestic. I think you just gave 3 influencers emotional breakdowns." We climbed into our separate cars. I was too wired to drive, so I just sat for a while, gripping the steering wheel and staring into the night. My phone buzzed like a dying bee in my pocket, notifications, texts, missed calls. I ignored all of it. The dust would settle on its own. For now, I just wanted quiet. On the drive home the next morning, it started to hit me. We'd done it. Not just exposed Kyle, but ended the performance. Disassembled the character he built from my pain. And we did it without screaming, without vandalism, without stooping. We used the one thing the family always hated about me, quiet, meticulous truth. We arrived back at the house just before noon. The air was different, thinner, cleaner, like the place had been waiting to exhale too. I stepped onto the porch, still half expecting someone to call me dramatic or selfish or ask why I couldn't just let it go. But there was no one left to shame me. Just me and Trevor and the sound of possibility. "Time to get back to work?" Trevor asked, already pulling off his jacket. I nodded. We spent the next few days building. That's all we did. We didn't talk much about Kyle or the fallout. We didn't check our phones unless it was to Google how to rewire an outlet or watch a YouTube tutorial on drywall seams. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for something forward-facing. We painted the front door dark blue, replaced the broken porch light, planted wildflower seeds along the cracked sidewalk. Trevor even started sketching plans for a new kitchen layout, complete with an island and open shelving. One night, I stayed up alone, sanding down an old cabinet. The house was quiet, warm. It smelled like cedar and fresh paint. I stared at the flickering light bulb above me and let the silence settle around my ribs like a blanket. I realized something then. I hadn't just been mad at Kyle for using me. I'd been grieving the fantasy. The dream that if I worked hard, stayed quiet, and played nice, they'd finally see me, finally choose me. They never would. But that no longer felt like a loss. It felt like a release. The next morning, I got a message from Malik. The cease and desist had been filed. The GoFundMe was frozen. Several donors had already submitted fraud complaints. And the kicker? A producer from a podcast about influencer scandals wanted to interview me. I declined. I wasn't interested in being anyone's story anymore. I had my own to build. That evening, I stood outside, looking at the house as the sun dropped behind it. The broken-down place I'd bought in shame now had a front door that closed, windows that gleamed, and a roof that didn't leak. And inside was something stronger than steel or foundation. Dignity. Earned, not borrowed. It wasn't over. But it was beginning point. 2 days later, the internet caught fire. I didn't see it start. Trevor did. He burst into the living room holding his phone like it was a detonator. "It's happening," he said, breathless. "You need to see this." I was on my hands and knees, pulling up carpet staples in what used to be the dining room. I stood, wiped my hands on my jeans, and followed him to the couch. There it was. A viral thread with screenshots of Aunt Karen's speech, a photo of Kyle mid-cringe on stage, and a link to a blog post titled, "Wellness or Grift?" The Kyle initiative's collapse in real time. Someone had filmed the entire thing from Kyle's grand entrance to Karen's final mic drop. The video had been clipped and reposted across Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit. It had been stitched, dissected, and memified. A reaction video of a popular streamer whispering, "Yo, this lady is not playing," had already hit 300,000 views. Within hours, #KyleExposed was trending. That familiar picture of me, half awake in my ruined kitchen, was everywhere again. But this time, it came with context. With my name blurred. With captions like, "He didn't consent to this story. He wasn't a brand." People were angry. And not at me. At Kyle. Donors demanded refunds. Sponsors began issuing statements. One by one, the brands he'd partnered with pulled out. The Wellness Collective in Sedona wiped its website clean. Kyle's follower count dropped by the thousands. And then, the bombshell. A thread posted by an ex-assistant of Kyle's detailing everything. The staged videos, fake testimonials, even script prompts Kyle gave for spontaneous, emotional live streams. It was thorough, brutal, believable. I didn't share it. I didn't say a word. I just watched. Mom called 3 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. The voicemail transcripts came in broken pieces. "This has gone too far. You think public shame is better than forgiveness? He's your brother, Marcus, he's human." The same guilt script I'd grown up under. But I didn't feel it anymore. There was no part of me that wanted to smooth this over. Kyle built a stage out of my pain. He made a profit out of my silence. He got applause for stepping on me. Now he was being booed off the stage, and I didn't even have to touch the mic. Aunt Karen called around 7 p.m. I expected her to gloat, but her tone was softer than I expected. "You okay?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, I am." "Good," she said. "Don't let them shame you for not protecting a lie. That's how they keep us quiet." That night, I sat on the porch alone, watching the sky fade from orange to purple. I thought I'd feel victorious, vindicated. But mostly, I felt, still, peaceful. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something deeper, something sturdier. It was freedom. I checked the house again before bed, room by room. Not because I was worried, but because I'd started to love it. Even the unfinished parts. Especially those. In the hallway, I paused at the mirror. The face looking back at me wasn't some broken little brother, begging to be seen. It was a man, one who had stopped waiting for permission to matter. By the weekend, Kyle had gone radio silent. His Instagram page, once a flood of daily affirmations and shirtless beach poses, now displayed a single post, a black square with white text that read, "Taking time to heal. Please respect my privacy." The comments weren't kind. Did your privacy consent to being monetized? Imagine needing privacy after turning your brother into a fundraising prop. Heal from what? Getting caught. Every attempt at damage control only made it worse. One of his former podcast guests issued a statement distancing themselves. A brand that once featured Kyle as their mindfulness ambassador reposted Aunt Karen's speech on their story with the caption, "Accountability matters." Kyle's online store, where he sold crystal-infused bath salts and $60 ebooks about manifesting resilience, vanished overnight. The website 404D. His coaching clients requested refunds. A few threatened lawsuits. I didn't cheer. I didn't post a smug follow-up. I just kept working on the house. If anything, the collapse felt eerily quiet on my end. peaceful almost. Like the storm had passed, and the silence left behind was something sacred. Then came the emails. Cousin after cousin. Aunts. Even a couple of people I hadn't spoken to since I was a teenager. All of them suddenly remembered how much they always admired my integrity. Some apologized. Others played dumb, as if they hadn't participated in my erasure at all. Family's complicated. One of them wrote, with a crying emoji. I didn't reply. The only message that gave me pause was from my dad. It came in the form of a long, meandering text. No greeting. Just a wall of words that alternated between passive-aggressive blame and vague olive branches. Your mother's been crying nonstop. She didn't deserve this. Kyle's not perfect, but what brother is? Families fight. It doesn't mean you aired dirty laundry in public. Call your mother. Not a word about what Kyle did. No acknowledgement of the GoFundMe. No apology for cutting me off. Just emotional blackmail wrapped in nostalgia. I sat with that message for a while. Then I deleted it. I owed them nothing. Later that day, Trevor pulled up with a truck full of reclaimed wood we'd gotten for free off Craigslist. We spent hours cutting it down to size, fitting it into the frame of the hallway wall. The work was grounding. Precise. Every piece of wood held imperfections, cracks, chips, knots. And still it fit. Beautiful in its honesty. By sundown, the hallway had a new face. Warm. Solid. Ours. That evening, I made dinner for the three of us. Me, Trevor, and Aunt Karen. We ate on the porch, passing around a bottle of cheap wine and laughing at nothing in particular. Karen raised her glass. To truth, she said, and the courage to stop asking for permission. We clinked glasses. After they left, I sat by myself for a while, watching the stars poke through the sky. I wasn't waiting for a call anymore. Wasn't watching for the next betrayal. The silence no longer felt like abandonment. It felt earned. The empire Kyle built had crumbled in days. But the house I was building? That would stand at IT happened on a Sunday, 3 weeks after the gala, during what should have been a routine cleanup. Trevor and I were pulling apart the built-in shelves in what used to be the study. If you could call a room with 4 cracked walls and a dead rat in the corner a study. The back panel of one of the shelves was warped, bulging just slightly, like something behind it had pushed out from the other side. Trevor tapped it, then gave me a look. You got a crowbar? I nodded. We pried it loose, expecting to find mold, maybe a rat's nest, or more of the forgotten junk this house seemed to hoard like secrets. Instead, there was a metal box. Heavy, dusty, locked with a rusted clasp that gave way with a little effort. Inside, a manila envelope, a faded, folded piece of paper, and an old family photo, one I'd never seen before. It was my grandfather, younger than I ever remembered him, maybe in his 40s, standing in front of this house. Beside him, a toddler, I realized, after a second, it was me. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten letter. Marcus, if you're reading this, then either you've found the box, or someone's finally done right by you. This house was mine. I bought it in '78 and lost it in '95 when the family thought I'd gone soft. Karen knows the story. I always meant to leave it to her. But you remind me of me. Watching. Waiting. Always second place in a family that mistook silence for weakness. This house is yours now. But more than that, know this, your voice matters. You're not a background character in someone else's story. You're the story. Grandpa Joe. Beneath the letter was the deed. Legally filed. Signed and notarized. Transferred to me. I couldn't breathe. For weeks, I'd been telling myself this house was mine because I'd bought it. Because no one else wanted it. Because it was all I could afford. But this was different. It wasn't pity. It wasn't guilt. It was choice. Someone had chosen me. Trevor stood behind me, silent for once. Dude, he finally whispered. You were literally meant to find this place. I nodded, too stunned to speak. That night, I called Karen. When I read her the letter, she didn't speak for a long time. Then, quietly, he told me once, before he passed, that someone in this family would break the cycle. That he just hoped he'd recognize them when they did. I don't know if I was that person. I don't know if I am. But for the first time, I believed I could be. In the days that followed, everything shifted. The way I walked through the house. The way I talked about it. The way I saw myself. This wasn't a place I escaped to anymore. It was a place I was meant to rebuild. I framed the photo of Grandpa Joe and me and hung it by the front door. It became a kind of compass. On the days when I wanted to give up, when my hands ached and the dust choked my lungs, I'd look at it and remember, This wasn't about proving anything to the family. This was about claiming something they never gave me. A legacy. One built on truth. On work. On refusing to be forgotten. It started with a blog post. I didn't even plan to write it. One night, after sealing a leak in the attic, I sat at the tiny desk in the corner of the living room, opened my laptop, and just let it pour out. I called it The Background Brother. It wasn't angry. It wasn't vindictive. It was just honest. I told the story of growing up quiet, of being edited out of family albums and conversations, of what it felt like to become useful only when my struggle could be weaponized for someone else's growth arc. I didn't name Kyle. I didn't need to. I wrote about the house, the dirt under my nails, the way the silence stopped being scary and started feeling sacred, the people who stayed, the ones who left, and how, in losing everything, I'd found something I didn't know I was allowed to want. A life that was mine. I hit publish around 3 a.m. and forgot about it. 2 days later, it had over 20,000 shares. Emails flooded in. Comments. Messages from people I'd never met, telling me they saw themselves in every word. People who'd been sidelined by their families. People discarded after setting a boundary. People who'd been used, erased, or guilt-tripped into submission their entire lives. Some messages were just a single line. Thank you for saying it out loud. Others were entire essays, gut-wrenching stories from strangers who had, like me, been the extra in someone else's production. A few people even offered to help with the house. One woman in Oregon said she had leftover materials from her own renovation. A guy from Michigan offered to fly out and help install the kitchen cabinets. A group of local volunteers who'd read the piece offered to come by on weekends. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was solidarity. Trevor printed out the post and taped it to the fridge. You finally found your audience, he said, grinning. And he was right. All those years I thought I had nothing to say, no story to tell. I was just waiting for the right people to hear it. Even Karen cried when she read it. You realize what you're doing, don't you? She said over the phone. You're turning survival into a blueprint. You're giving people a way out of the fog. I hadn't thought of it like that. But maybe that's what this all was, a lighthouse for people like me. The ones who thought being good meant being invisible. I started getting invites to speak. Local groups, small podcasts, panels on chosen family and toxic loyalty. I said no to most. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because I didn't want to become what Kyle had been, a persona. I wasn't here to build a brand. I was here to build a life. The only message that stopped me cold came from a woman named Rebecca. She wrote, I'm your cousin, your mom's sister's daughter. We never met. I wasn't allowed around much. But I read your piece. And I just wanted to say, I see you. I believe you. And I'm sorry you went through that alone. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply right away. Maybe I never would. But the weight of her message stuck with me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. And more importantly, I didn't feel small. By mid-May, the house didn't look like a disaster anymore. It looked like a project with a soul. The kitchen had new cabinets, donated by a couple in Sacramento who read the blog post and drove 7 hours just to drop them off. The living room had working lights, a patched ceiling, and a couch I didn't have to feel ashamed to offer guests. But it wasn't just the house that was rebuilding. It was me. Every weekend, new people showed up. Some with tools, some with snacks, others with nothing but stories and open hearts. They didn't come because I asked them to. They came because they recognized the ache behind my words. And somewhere in that ache, they found their own. One guy, Nate, came every Saturday like clockwork. A carpenter with a quiet voice and eyes that had clearly seen some things. He never asked questions. Just showed up, got to work, and left a six-pack on the porch when he was done. One weekend, while we were installing a new front door, he finally spoke. My dad left when I was 11. I kept thinking he'd come back. Even when I was 25. Even when I got married. I didn't say anything. I read your piece. It made me realize I've been waiting to be chosen my whole life. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just nodded and kept working. And that was enough. Another woman, Sandra, brought her teenage son. She was a single mom who said she'd once been excommunicated from her own family for refusing to forgive her brother's abuse. He's not broken, she said, pointing at her son. He just needed to see an adult stand up for themselves. That stuck with me. This house wasn't just being fixed with wood and nails. It was being stitched together with the scraps of other people's courage. And each new floorboard, each coat of paint, was a thread in that quilt. Trevor joked that we should put up a sign out front that read, House of the Unclaimed. But deep down, I think we both knew it wasn't a joke. We were building something bigger than shelter. One afternoon, I caught myself smiling at the mirror in the hallway. I'd never done that before. Not really. The man looking back at me wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't bitter. He looked like someone who'd finally stopped apologizing for existing. That same day, a letter came in the mail. No return address. Handwritten. Inside was a short note. I read your blog. I don't know if you'll believe me, but I donated to Kyle's fundraiser. Not because I thought he was saving you, but because I recognized the look in your eyes. I lost my brother to suicide 4 years ago. He was the quiet one, too. The one no one ever listened to. I hope you keep speaking. You're helping more people than you know. It hit me like a gut punch. Because the truth is, I'd almost been that brother. More than once. I thought about posting the letter. About turning it into a post. But I didn't. Some things were just for me. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the community work fade into twilight. There was laughter echoing from inside. The smell of grilled cheese drifting out the open window. Someone had brought fresh flowers and stuck them in an old mason jar on the counter. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Not tolerated. Not pitted. Chosen. The letter came in a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name carefully written, in handwriting I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. I knew it was hers the moment I picked it up. Mom. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the kitchen table, next to the jar of wildflowers someone had brought last week. It sat there all afternoon, untouched, radiating like a tiny scent of guilt and memory. I made lunch. Did dishes. Helped Trevor with the closet shelves. But my eyes kept drifting back to it. Eventually, I gave in. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded in thirds. Marcus. I don't know what I'm supposed to say anymore. Everything I say feels wrong. I keep thinking about when you were little and used to line your toys up in perfect rows. You always said, order makes the world safer. I think about that now and wonder how many times I contributed to your disorder. I was angry after the gala. Embarrassed. Confused. I felt like I was losing both my sons at once. But I've been reading everything. Watching. Listening. I see now that Kyle hurt you more than we ever acknowledged. And I know I didn't protect you. Not from him. Not from us. I told myself you were fine because you never caused problems. But now I understand that silence is its own kind of scream. This isn't a request for forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. I'm sorry, Marcus. I truly am. Mom. No grand gestures. No excuses. Just a letter. And inside it, a flicker of something unfamiliar. Accountability. I sat with it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt this strange, hollow ache. Like someone had cleaned out a room in my chest I didn't even know was cluttered. I showed it to Trevor, who read it carefully and said, "That sounds like the most honest thing she's ever written." I nodded. "Yeah. Are you going to write back?" "I don't know." And I didn't. Because for once, I didn't feel compelled to soothe her feelings. I didn't feel the old reflex to make her pain smaller than mine so she could sleep at night. I didn't feel responsible for her discomfort. But I did feel something. Maybe not healing. Maybe not closure. But the first crack in the wall between us. Still, I didn't frame the letter. I didn't read it out loud at one of our Saturday night porch dinners. I tucked it into the back of my journal and left it there, like a stone placed gently on a grave, not to mourn, but to mark that something had once lived there. That same week, a package arrived. It was from someone in Pennsylvania who had read my story and sent a hand-carved wooden plaque. It was simple, burned with one sentence. "You are not disposable." I hung it right by the front door. Every person who came into the house saw it first. Some paused to read it. Others nodded in quiet understanding. It became a kind of welcome mat for the soul. And slowly, the house began to feel less like a renovation site and more like a sanctuary. Evenings blurred into fire-bit talks and mismatched dinners. The place buzzed with a rotating cast of kind misfits, people with scar tissue and stories they didn't always know how to tell. But here, they didn't need to tell them. Here, presence was enough. One night, Karen pulled me aside after dinner and said, "You realize you've built more than a house, right?" "I think I'm starting to," I said. And I meant it started with a joke. Trevor and I were sitting on the back steps one evening, watching the sky dim into shades of lavender and copper, sipping beers after a long day of sealing the crawl space. I had an old notebook in my lap, half filled with supply lists and room measurements, when he said it. "You know," he began, "you should start a foundation or something. Second Sons Anonymous." Help people like us stop asking to be seen. I laughed, but the words stuck. That night, after he left, I stayed up at the kitchen table staring at that notebook. I flipped past the floor plans, past the scribbled to-do lists and materials quotes, and found a blank page. At the top, I wrote, "The Second Son Foundation." I didn't know what it would be yet. I just knew it felt right. Over the next few days, I started sketching it out. The idea wasn't to rescue anyone. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just wanted to create a place, a platform, a network, a resource for people who had been pushed aside by their families and needed help rebuilding from scratch. No judgment. No shame. No, just try harder. Just tools. Stories. Community. A blueprint for beginning again. Karen lit up when I told her. "You're turning your wound into a ladder," she said. "Not just for you, for all of us." Trevor offered to help build the website. Within a week, we had a placeholder page up with a mission statement and a donation link. And people responded. Not with pity, but with purpose. Small donations trickled in. Messages from social workers, therapists, estranged adults who'd gone no contact and didn't know what to do next. Survivors of narcissistic households who had nowhere to turn. People who'd been told for years that their pain was selfish, their distance dramatic. One woman emailed me a single sentence. "I didn't know there was a name for what I've been living through. Thank you." That hit me harder than anything Kyle ever did, because it reminded me that what I'd been through wasn't unique. It was systemic. And the silence around it? That was by design. They tell you family is everything. But for some of us, family is a fire we've spent our whole lives trying not to get burned by. The foundation took shape slowly. We started organizing local workshops, basic home repair for beginners, budgeting after escape, mental health first aid. We reached out to trauma-informed therapists willing to volunteer hours. We created a Discord server, a place for people to talk without being told to just forgive and move on. And every time someone asked where it all began, I pointed to the house. The broken down, discarded structure that no one wanted. The place where I found myself. The place where community was born not from legacy, but from loss. The front porch became our unofficial meeting spot. Every week, new faces showed up. People brought food, stories, tools. And somewhere in the rhythm of shared labor and mutual respect, healing happened. Real healing. Not the kind you live stream for likes, but the kind that grows in the quiet. That hums in drywall and firewood and hand-painted signs that say, "You belong here." Kyle hadn't tried to reach out again. Not directly, but a burner account started following the foundation's social media. I didn't block it. I didn't follow back. I didn't need to. This wasn't about him anymore. This was mine. And for once, that was enough. The first birthday I celebrated in the house came with no fanfare. No family texts. No store-bought cake with the wrong name spelled in icing. And yet, it was the best one I'd ever had. Trevor showed up first that morning with a ridiculous paper crown and a cooler full of cold brew and donuts. Karen arrived shortly after, arms loaded with mismatched mugs, candles, and a handmade banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Marcus," with a C, not a K. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my coffee. One by one, people filtered in. Neighbors who'd once eyed the house warily. Online followers who'd become in-person friends. Foundation volunteers who treated the porch like home base. They brought gifts wrapped in grocery bags, pie tins with Post-it notes, a few six-packs, and even a homemade toolkit with Second Son engraved on the hammer handle. There wasn't a single blood relative in the room. And it was perfect. We grilled in the backyard. Someone set up a speaker and played a mix of old indie tracks and acoustic covers. There was no forced conversation, no judgment disguised as concern, no one pretending everything was fine while letting resentment ferment behind their eyes. There was just laughter, soft space, real presence. After dark, someone lit sparklers, and we stood in a circle as Karen handed me a tiny cake she'd baked herself, chocolate with espresso frosting, decorated with small icing stars, written carefully across the top. To the man who rebuilt himself. I froze. It wasn't just the cake. It was that she'd seen me, truly seen me. Not as the disappointing son, not as the quiet brother, not as a cautionary tale, but as someone worth celebrating. The whole room sang. Off-key. Loud. Beautiful. When they finished, I blew out the candles. I didn't wish for anything. I didn't need to. Later, Trevor pulled me aside. "Hey," he said, suddenly a little serious. "You know you're like a brother to me, right?" I nodded. "You're more of a brother than Kyle ever was." He clinked his bottle against mine. Exactly. Brothers by choice. That's the only kind I believe in now. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat on the porch with Karen. The moon hung low and soft above the roofline. She sipped wine from a chipped mug and looked out at the backyard where the fire it still glowed faintly. You ever think about what your life would have looked like if you hadn't bought this house? She asked. All the time. Regrets? I shook my head. Not one. She smiled. Me neither. We sat there in the quiet, and for the first time, I realized something. I had a family again. Not one I was born into. Not one bound by obligation or holidays or guilt. But one made of people who chose me. And I chose them back. There's something holy about that. Something rare. We spend so much of our lives trying to earn love we should have been given freely. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to rewrite the story. And this time, you get to choose who gets a chapter. I always knew Kyle would come back eventually. It wasn't a question of if, only when. The message arrived on a Thursday morning. A simple email, addressed formally. Dear Marcus. No emojis. No flippant hashtags. No links. Just a few paragraphs that read like someone trying very hard to sound small. I've been following what you've built. I didn't know how to reach out after everything imploded, but I've been thinking about it for months. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but if you're open to it, I'd like to talk. I miss you. I'm sorry. Kyle. There it was. Not the apology I deserved. Not the depth of reckoning I needed, but a white flag of sorts. I stared at it for a long time. Trevor found me on the porch later that afternoon, the laptop still open in my lap. You okay? He asked. He emailed. Trevor didn't ask who. He didn't have to. What did he say? That he misses me. That he's sorry. He nodded slowly. You going to reply? I don't know, I said. I'm not angry. Not really. But I don't want to be pulled back in, either. I've done too much work to get out. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, you don't owe him anything, man. Not forgiveness. Not access. Especially not after the way he used you. I nodded. I know. That night, I read the email again. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel fear. What I felt, surprisingly, was pity. Not for the version of Kyle who'd conned thousands out of wellness scams and fake charities, but for the one behind that, the brother who never learned how to exist outside the spotlight. The boy who had always been told he was special, even when he hadn't earned it, and had no idea how to survive in a world that didn't worship him. But pity wasn't a reason to reopen old wounds. So I didn't respond. Instead, I wrote him a letter I never planned to send. Kyle, you burned the bridge. Not once. Not just with the fundraiser. But over a lifetime. I spent years hoping you'd see me. That you'd treat me like an equal. Like family. But you only saw what I could give you. And when I stopped giving, you turned on me. You don't get access to this version of me. The one who finally clawed his way out. The one who stopped apologizing for taking up space. I hope you heal. I really do. But you won't do it here. Marcus. I folded it, tucked it into my journal, and left it there. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay closed. In the weeks that followed, the foundation grew. We hosted our first in-person workshop, Building Without Permission. 35 people showed up. Some were estranged from their families. Others had recently escaped toxic relationships. All of them came carrying invisible baggage. We didn't offer answers, just space and tools. During the closing circle, one woman stood up, tears in her eyes, and said, I didn't know it was possible to rebuild without resentment. I smiled. It is. Kyle faded from my mind after that. Not out of denial, but because there was no room left for him. My life was too full now. Too real. And when you finally have peace, chaos starts to feel like an old outfit you don't fit into anymore. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need reconciliation. I just needed to keep going. By summer, the house was no longer a ruin. The siding had been replaced. The kitchen gleamed with second-hand charm, open shelving, a reclaimed butcher block island, even a chalkboard wall where guests left notes, drawings, affirmations. The yard was no longer a graveyard of weeds, but a modest garden, blooming with tomatoes, lavender, and wildflowers. And one Saturday, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hosted a housewarming. No theme, no dress code, no curated playlist or aesthetic intentions. Just an open door, folding chairs, a big pot of pasta on the stove, and the people who'd become my family by choice. They came in waves, friends, volunteers, neighbors, strangers who felt like kin. A woman from Nevada who'd driven 8 hours just to say thank you. A guy from Kansas who'd spent the last year in therapy because of the blog. He brought homemade bread. At some point, I looked around and realized something that knocked the wind out of me. This was the home I'd always wanted. Not just the physical structure, but the feeling. Belonging without performance. Warmth without expectation. Love without transaction. Trevor handed me a drink and raised his eyebrows. Well, it's real, I said. I don't think I believed it would be. You built it, he said. You didn't wait for permission this time. I nodded, holding back the emotion that swelled in my throat. Later, I slipped away from the crowd for a moment and stood alone on the porch. The same porch where I'd once opened the door to Kyle. The same porch where I'd cried into a cold beer the night my family exiled me. The same porch where Trevor showed up with pizza, where Karen told her story, where healing began one nail and paintbrush at a time. I looked out over the yard, filled with laughing people and mismatched chairs, citronella candles flickering in the dusk. And I remembered that first night, sitting alone in the car, staring at this place like it might swallow me whole. Back then, I didn't buy a home. I bought rock bottom. But somehow, in clearing the wreckage, literal and emotional, I found the foundation that had always been waiting beneath. I'd always believed family was something you were born into. But the truth is, family is something you build. And mine stood right in front of me, with calloused hands, open hearts, and their names spelled correctly on every cake. Aunt Karen gave a toast just before sunset. To Marcus, she said, holding her glass high. The background brother no more. The man who taught us all what it means to rebuild, not in spite of pain, but because of it. I looked at the people gathered in front of me, some crying, some clapping, all seeing me, not the silent sibling, not the fixer, not the fallback, just me, whole, held, here, and finally home. I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet, warm, the soft kind of stillness that only comes when every beam and floorboard has finally exhaled. No construction dust in the air. No to-do lists pinned to the fridge. Just a mug of black coffee and the sound of birds waking up outside the window. I stepped onto the porch barefoot. The air smelled like lavender and old wood. A light breeze rustled the wind chimes Karen had gifted me, a set made from scrap copper and old house keys, each one stamped with a word. Worth, quiet, fire, rebuild. I stood there for a long time, not thinking, just being. And then I walked inside and ran my hand along the doorframe. The paint was still a little rough in places, but I liked that. It reminded me that perfection wasn't the goal, ownership was. Real ownership. Not just the deed tucked away in my drawer, signed by a grandfather who saw me when no one else did. But ownership of my story, my voice, myself. I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen, where strangers turned family had shared meals and secrets and laughter. The hallway, where I'd once collapsed from exhaustion and now proudly walked through with dirt under my nails and joy in my chest. The living room, where a single post sparked a movement and then a mission. Every wall told a truth. Every corner held a piece of someone who'd helped me breathe again. And at the center of it all, I stood not as someone who had been fixed, but someone who had reclaimed. Not the good son, not the forgotten brother, not the cause in someone else's inspirational arc. Just Marcus, builder, founder, man who stayed. Before the day unfolded, I drove to a print shop and picked up something I'd been designing for weeks. A plaque. Simple, wood-backed, hand-etched in clean serif font. The Second Son House. Founded 2024. A place for the unchosen to begin again. I screwed it into the wall beside the front door. Then I sat on the steps, pulled out my journal, and wrote one last entry. I used to think being erased was the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I know, erasure made space for reinvention. And reinvention led me here. This house. This porch. These people. Not born family. But better. Because they saw me. And now, finally, so do I.